Hello everyone, welcome once again to Pop Culture Comics in Overland Park, Kansas. I'm Captain Logan, and it's time for my comic book picks of the week, bringing you my favorites in the categories of DC, Marvel, Independent, and kids books. My first recommendation for the week is DC. Here is John Constantine Hellblazer Annual for 2011. This oversized annual is a wonderfully dark, atmospheric mystery about a place called Suicide Bridge, which seems to call to the most down-and-out people, especially young adults with abusive home lives, and beckons them to kill themselves. It's a standalone story that requires really no prior knowledge of Hellblazer, as all of John's history and lore is effortlessly woven into the narrative. John's own history with an abusive father, his mystical powers, and his obsession with smoking cigarettes. As he searches for a man missing he knew as a kid, he relives the pain of his awful childhood, and the comic explores the sad reasons parents do and say horrible things to their children, how they blame their children for things they have no control of, and the scarring impact that has on those kids. Constantine thinks a lot about places in the real world that might as well be hell, and it's a very bleak story, but not without a glimmer of optimism toward the end, and a moment where Constantine at least has a reason to crack a smile. I love Pierre Milligan's creative use of language. His writing is witty, which helps elevate the book from being just depressing to depressing and entertaining. The length of the book allows for a lot of writing along with the visual storytelling, and Milligan's descriptions are sophisticated and often thought-provoking, like when John describes touching an old lady's hand like twigs inside a deflated balloon. I also really appreciate the understated artwork by Simon Bisley, and I like that it's printed on cheaper, non-glossy paper like a lot of books were before last decade, giving it more of a pulp feel. It feels appropriately unpolished. If you're in the mood for a good supernatural horror mystery, and something a little understated, go for this one this week. Moving on to Marvel, it's a brand new miniseries from Abnett and Lanning. Here's Villains for Hire, #1. Abnett and Lanning have taken their very entertaining series about obscure and lesser-known heroes hired and working for cash and spun off a 4-issue mini about bad guys doing the very same thing. But it isn't simply a copycat group. This story is deeply rooted in events from Heroes for Hire. The Purple Man is finally out of jail, and he's using his pheromone powers and his studied talent for manipulation to hire villains not only to pull big jobs for him, but ultimately he plans to take back the Heroes for Hire organization, which he claims belongs to him and was stolen from him by Misty Knight. The first job is the theft of an armored car, a Villains for Hire team that includes Shocker, Scourge, Avalanche, Deathstalker, and Headhunter. I love Shocker's response when Purple Man says, "Villain, are you for hire?" and he says, "Pejorative term much?" The job is going okay until they suddenly get ambushed, not by heroes, but by another group of villains, including Tiger Shark and Bombshell, and I enjoyed all the intrigue and power plays between these rivals in the superhuman underworld. It's a highly unpredictable book, and the cliffhanger totally caught me off guard. I'm really glad Abnett and Lanning are the ones doing this, and it isn't just the same idea as Heroes for Hire, but with villains. This is an important companion to Heroes for Hire, and if you've been following that book, you're probably going to want to read this too. Now, if you've never touched Heroes for Hire, it stands fine on its own, as just enough background is integrated for new readers to keep up. Then jumping over to Independence, we're back to IDW again this week. Here is Ninja Turtles microseries Raphael, #1. In the tradition of the Ninja Turtles micro-series published by Mirage in the 80s, IDW is putting out a one-shot for each of the 4 turtles, and each will continue an ongoing story that started in this one. I know I've been showcasing a lot of IDW lately, but I haven't had the chance to review any turtles since the monthly started, and while I've been loving that series, I'm actually more engrossed in what's happening here so far. Part of that is because this takes place after all the origin stuff going on in the monthly, and after Raphael has been reunited with his brothers and gotten his memory back. He runs into a new mutant named Alopex, who is an Arctic fox, and that's appropriate since, and I looked this up, Alopex is part of the old scientific Latin term for Arctic fox, Alopex lagopus. She claims to be in trouble, and Raphael offers to help her. It seems she was mutated in the same experiment that mutated Splinter and the Turtles. But of course, there's more going on with her than meets the eye, and I won't give that away, or the familiar characters debuting here that I kind of geeked out about seeing again. Again, the monthly is doing a great job with its fresh take on the origin, but I kind of think more old-school Turtle fans would have been more jazzed about seeing the Turtles in comics again if this had been the first issue for that series. The art's a little different here, not a whole lot of detail in most panels, and the characters are less defined than in the main series, but that seems to add to the mysterious atmosphere which complements this particular story. Also, the masks are in their different colors again. If you haven't tried Ninja Turtles from IDW yet, or you haven't cared for the first story arc, try this out and see if it's more up your alley. And finally, for my kids' book this week, I went for Looney Tunes #204. If you haven't read a modern Looney Tunes comic, you might be a little surprised by how traditional it is. It's basically just like watching an old Looney Tunes cartoon, except it's in comic book form. That's a bit of a weird transition for me. Some shows, like The Simpsons, seem to naturally translate to comics, while the Warner Brothers cartoon formula is harder because of the on-screen timing that was so crucial to making that comedy work. But this comic works hard to keep as much of that timing as possible in panels, and it's refreshing to see something that's timeless done in that old style without too many weird liberties. But there are also some little references to current culture here and there, which is appropriate because the cartoons made references contemporary to their time also. At one point, Bugs takes a picture of Daffy being held by the abominable snow monster and says he can post it on his website. There are two stories, each about Bugs Bunny. The first is the classic formula of the monster that thinks Daffy is a bunny and keeps trying to hug him to death, and Bugs keeps doing things to make him think Daffy's the bunny so he'll forget all about Bugs. In the second story, Bugs, who's always making a wrong turn at Albuquerque, decides to finally go to Albuquerque, which I thought was hilarious. And he has a confrontation with Yosemite Sam, who thinks he's a turkey because, well, he's dressed up like one, trying to get a job as a mascot. Mistaken identity was always a big theme in these cartoons. And the best gag in the comic is in that story, where Bugs and Yosemite Sam find themselves in a similar setting and in similar roles to Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote, trying to put their finger on what exactly it reminds them of. Fun stuff for both kids and adults who love cartoons. And now here are some other books I read this week that I really liked, and you might too. Here's Batwing, number 4. The disturbing origin of Batwing, revealing his violent childhood and why he now lives by a particular moral code. And also from DC, it's Action Comics number 4. I was worried he didn't exist in the New 52 continuity, but Steel is back, and he's fighting with Superman against the newly created Metallo. And from Marvel, the highly anticipated Defenders number 1. Doctor Strange puts together a team of some of the most mystical and powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe to fight a force that's driving people mad. And finally, hands down, my favorite cover for the week, Venom, number 10. The government wants to take the symbiote away from Flash, but he won't give it up. So who do they send after him? Captain America, of course. Well, hey, that's all I've got for you today. If you're ever in the Kansas City area, be sure to check out Pop Culture Comics right here in Overland Park, Kansas. It's where I am at this very moment, and it's my very favorite place to get comic books. If you don't live in the area, be sure to support your own local comic book store. And if you happen to be watching this on the Pop Culture website, please check us out at Geekvolution. That's youtube.com/Geekvolution for our many, many videos. You can also check us out at wearegeeksnotnerds.com, and you can follow us on Twitter. That's at Geekvolution. Thanks, as always, for watching. I'm Captain Logan, and happy reading.